Imagine a warship that never needs to pull into port for fuel, a floating airbase that can patrol the globe for years. Now imagine someone saying a country that only started building carriers 2 decades ago has already built one. Sounds unbelievable, right? That's the claim that set off a storm. China is building a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. For years, experts laughed. After all, the United States took roughly 4 decades to move from its first conventional carrier to its first nuclear one, a slow, tech-heavy climb. So when China went from its first carrier in 2012 to talk of a nuclear carrier in the 2020s, many people called it a stretch. Skeptics weren't just foreign commentators. Even some Chinese military fans thought it sounded too fast. The idea felt like watching someone go from learning to ride a bike to flying a jet in a single summer. Impressive if true, suspicious until proven. That tension, bold claim versus hard questions, is what makes this story worth following. In this video, we'll cut through the noise. What evidence showed up, why people doubted it, and whether the signs point to a real game changer. Next, we'll rewind the timeline, from Liaoning to Fujian, and explain exactly why so many were skeptical in the first place. To understand the doubts, we need to look at China's aircraft carrier journey step by step. In 2012, China's very first carrier, the Liaoning, officially entered service. But here's the catch. It wasn't fully homegrown. It was actually a refurbished Soviet ship bought from Ukraine. So many experts dismissed it as more of a training platform than a serious frontline carrier. 5 years later, in 2017, China launched the Shandong, its first domestically built carrier. This was a big deal, but it still relied on conventional fuel, just like Liaoning. Then in 2022, the Fujian made headlines. It was larger, more advanced, and equipped with electromagnetic catapults for launching jets. The kind of system only the U.S. Navy had mastered before. So by 2022, China had gone from no carriers at all to 3 major ships in just a decade. Impressive? Absolutely. But here's where skepticism kicked in. All 3 were conventionally powered, not nuclear. Historically, the U.S. Navy needed almost 40 years of experience before rolling out its first nuclear-powered carrier in 1960. By comparison, China had barely 20 years of carrier-building history. Even U.S. media reports claiming China had secretly started a 4th carrier in 2021 were taken with a grain of salt. People thought, sure, they can build carriers quickly now, but nuclear-powered? That's a whole different level. The doubts were reasonable. It felt like China was trying to sprint through a marathon. But in 2024, something unexpected happened. Clear signs that maybe the skeptics were wrong. 2024 became the year when speculation turned into something far more concrete. For the first time, satellite photos revealed the outline of a massive new warship under construction in a Chinese shipyard. What caught analysts' attention was its sheer size. Based on measurements from the images, the hull was comparable to the U.S. Navy's newest and largest ship, the USS Gerald R. Ford. That alone sent a signal. China was no longer just copying older designs. It was aiming for the very top tier. Then came the bigger bombshell. American media reported that China was testing nuclear reactors designed specifically for warships. These weren't ordinary power plants. The specs were staggering. A reactor nearly 10 meters wide and 15 meters tall, producing up to 125 megawatts of power. To put that in perspective, that's more output than the reactors on the U.S. Nimitz-class carriers, which run at around 100 megawatts each. This wasn't just a theory anymore. It looked like China was building the engine for its future flagship. The strongest clue came later that year. At a shipyard exhibition, a model of the so-called Type 004 aircraft carrier was quietly displayed. Observers quickly noticed something missing. No chimney. Conventional carriers always need large exhaust funnels to vent fuel emissions, but a nuclear carrier doesn't. That absence became the smoking gun. By the end of 2024, what had once been dismissed as impossible suddenly looked real. China wasn't just experimenting. It was preparing to launch a true nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. So why does this matter so much? In the next section, we'll break down why nuclear power completely changes the game for aircraft carriers, and why it could shift the balance of naval power worldwide. So, why is the jump to nuclear power such a big deal? To understand, let's compare it to something everyday. Imagine two road trips. One with a regular gas-powered car, and one with an electric car that never needs charging. Which one has the advantage? That's the leap nuclear carriers make. A conventional carrier has a limited range. Fully fueled, it can travel about 22,000 kilometers before needing to refuel. That sounds like a lot, but in global terms, it's not. By contrast, a nuclear-powered carrier can operate for years without refueling. After one nuclear fuel cycle, it can cover nearly 2 million kilometers. That's like circling the Earth 50 times non-stop. This isn't just about range. It's about independence. A nuclear carrier doesn't rely on constant fuel shipments, which means its supply chain is lighter and its battle group is less vulnerable. It can stay at sea, project power, and operate far from home bases for extended periods. That's why naval experts call them mobile sea bases. And there's another key point: energy output. Nuclear reactors don't just move the ship. They generate massive amounts of electricity. That extra power can run advanced radar, electromagnetic catapults, laser weapons, or even future railguns. It also supports the dozens of aircraft, drones, and escort ships in its battle group. In short, nuclear power transforms an aircraft carrier from a ship into a floating, self-sustaining military ecosystem. This is why only two countries so far, the United States and France, have been able to field nuclear carriers. If China's Type 004 is truly nuclear, it won't just be its fourth carrier. It'll make China the third nation in history to cross this threshold. Now that we know why it matters, let's dive into the actual design and capabilities of China's mysterious Type 004 aircraft carrier, and why some experts say it could even rival America's best. When analysts examined satellite images and leaked details of the Type 04, the numbers were, honestly, jaw-dropping. The carrier is estimated to be about 335 meters long and 83 meters wide. That's actually longer than 3 football fields placed end to end. In terms of displacement, which is the measure of how heavy a ship is, the 004 may reach 115,000 tons. For a bit of context, America's most advanced Ford-class carrier comes in at about 112,000 tons. In other words, China's carrier could actually be bigger. Size isn't everything, of course, but it really does matter. A larger deck means more aircraft. Experts predict the Type 004 could carry 80 or more carrier-based aircraft, including advanced models like the J-35 stealth fighter, and possibly even the future 6th-generation J-36. That puts it on par with, and maybe even beyond, the U.S. Navy's capacity. Then there's the launch system. Instead of ski jump ramps like older carriers, the Type 004 is expected to use 4 electromagnetic catapults, the same high-tech system that the U.S. Ford-class pioneered. This allows heavier jets and drones to take off more efficiently, increasing combat readiness. Combined with 3 aircraft elevators strategically placed around the deck, the carrier could launch and recover planes faster, keeping a constant rotation of aircraft in the air. But the real power comes when the 004 sails as part of a carrier battle group. Alongside it will be Type 055 destroyers, some of the most advanced warships in the world. Armed with hypersonic missiles that can strike targets up to 1,500 kilometers away, these ships provide deadly protection. With the 004 at the center, this battle group would have both long-range strike capability and powerful air dominance. Taken together, the Type 04 isn't just China's next carrier. It represents a leap in design and firepower, a symbol that China intends to compete directly with the US on the world's oceans. But how does it stack up when you put it side by side with America's carrier fleet? That's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. To see how significant the Type 004 is, we really need to place it against the current global picture. Right now, there are around 30 active aircraft carriers in the world. But here's the real shocker. Only 2 countries operate nuclear-powered carriers, the United States and France. Out of those, the US dominates with 11 nuclear-powered carriers. France has just 1. For decades, America's carriers have been unmatched. The Ford class, launched in 2017, has been considered the gold standard, equipped with electromagnetic catapults, cutting-edge radar, and advanced command systems. The U.S. Navy has long used these floating fortresses to enforce its global presence, whether in the Pacific, the Middle East, or near Europe. For many years, no other country could even come close. China, however, has been sprinting forward. In 2012, people laughed at the refurbished Liaoning, calling it second-hand. But by 2022, China had already built the Fujian, matching U.S. technology with electromagnetic launch systems. Now, in just over a decade, China is on the brink of joining the nuclear carrier club, a leap the U.S. itself needed nearly 40 years to make. What's more, the Type 004 may not just match the Ford class, it could surpass it in certain areas. With a projected larger displacement, more powerful reactors, and the ability to integrate next-generation aircraft, it challenges America's long-standing naval dominance. This is why U.S. analysts are sounding alarms. For over half a century, America's carriers have been the backbone of its global influence. But if China succeeds, the U.S. will face something it hasn't in modern history, a near-peer rival on the seas. And the story doesn't end there, because while the world is just digesting the news of the Type 004, China is already moving on to the next step, the mysterious Type 005. If the Type 004 is impressive, what comes after is even more ambitious. China isn't stopping at just one nuclear-powered carrier. Reports suggest that the country is already planning its Type 005, a carrier that could be the true game-changer. While details are still secret, analysts believe the Type 005 will be larger, more advanced, and even more automated than the 004. Think of the Type 004 as a proof of concept, showing the world China can build and operate nuclear carriers. The Type 005, however, is meant to push the envelope even further, possibly incorporating laser weapons, railguns, and next-generation aircraft. China's long-term goal is build a blue-water navy that can operate across the globe, not just near its shores. For decades, China's naval power was focused on coastal defense. But with carriers like the 004 and 005, Beijing is signaling that it wants to project power far beyond Asia, into the Indian Ocean, the Middle East, and even the Atlantic. To put it simply, these carriers are not just about ships, they're about global reach. America's dominance has always rested on its ability to send a carrier strike group anywhere in the world. Now China wants the same ability, to fly its flag in distant waters and influence international events thousands of miles from home. This raises a pressing question. If China succeeds, how will the United States and its allies respond? Because what we're really looking at here is not just a new ship, but a shift in global power balance. The rise of China's Type 004 isn't just about building a bigger ship. It's about rewriting the rules of global power at sea. For more than 70 years, the U.S. Navy's carriers have been the ultimate symbol of military strength, floating air bases that could appear anywhere in the world and change the course of a conflict. If China deploys nuclear-powered carriers, that monopoly ends. Suddenly, the U.S. will have to share the oceans with another superpower capable of long-range sustained operations. Imagine a standoff in the South China Sea, the Indian Ocean, or even the Middle East. Before, the US could send a carrier group to dominate the situation. With China's nuclear carriers, the balance becomes far less certain. And it's not just about military might. Carriers are political tools. When America sends a carrier near a crisis zone, it sends a clear message. We're here, and we're in control. Now, China could do the same. Docking in Africa, patrolling the Persian Gulf, or showing presence in the Mediterranean. For countries caught in between, this offers an alternative to U.S. dominance, which could shift global alliances. Another layer of strategy comes from energy independence. Nuclear-powered carriers don't need to refuel for decades. That means China can project power without relying on vulnerable fuel supply chains. A critical advantage in any long conflict. For Washington, this development is alarming. For Beijing, it's a milestone toward achieving its dream of being a true global naval power. And for the rest of the world, it signals that the age of U.S. naval supremacy might be coming to an end. But the real question is, what happens next? Will this spark an arms race, or can the U.S. and China find a way to balance power without conflict? So, what does all of this mean? The story of China's Type 004 isn't just about a ship, it's about a turning point in history. For decades, the U.S. Navy's dominance on the seas was unquestioned. Its carriers were unmatched, its reach unchallenged. But now, for the first time since World War II, that dominance is being tested. China's leap from the Liaoning to the Fujian, and now to the nuclear-powered Type 004, shows a remarkable speed of progress. What took the U.S. generations to master, China is achieving in just over a decade. And with plans for the even more advanced Type 005, it's clear Beijing isn't slowing down. The implications are massive. We're looking at a future where two superpowers can both deploy fleets across the globe, influence conflicts, and shape world politics through naval power. This isn't just about military strength. It's about diplomacy, trade security, and who gets to set the rules of the global order. In short, the Type 004 marks the dawn of a new naval era, one where the U.S. no longer sails alone at the top, and where China's flag may soon be seen in oceans it has never dominated before. Whether this leads to competition, cooperation, or confrontation, only time will tell. But one thing is certain. The world's oceans will never look the same again,